100. And guess what? The majority of these people are going to come from India and probably China. Okay? And as we discussed, the percentage of immigrants as part of the total population is just rapidly increasing. So in Australia, it's almost a third now. In Canada, it's a quarter. In Germany, it's a fifth. And these percentages will go up and up and up, leading to more and greater ethnic tension and immigrant protests within these countries. As you can see, the number of immigrants coming from India far surpasses that of other countries, okay? And these are just legal immigrants. We're not counting in students. So there are millions and millions of Indian students right now in Canada on student visas. And they're looking for a path to permanent residency, to citizenship. And that's what leads to situations like this, okay? You have these viral videos online where you have thousands and thousands of Indian students lining up for hours and hours because they're applying for a minimum wage job at a restaurant or at a store. Life for these Indian students is just terrible. A lot of them live 8 to a room, okay? There's one room that was meant for one person. There are now 8 students living in that room. At the same time, what's really interesting is that the Indians are now an extremely powerful political force in Canada. This was the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, meeting with representatives of the Indian community because he depends on them for his votes. In last year's federal election, 22 Indian people of Indian descent were elected to parliament, okay? So in parliament, there's 243 seats. 22 of them now are Indian. How many Chinese? How many MPs of Chinese origin? There are less than 10. So even though the Chinese have been there longer, and even though they're actually more numerous Chinese than Indians, the Indians are extremely powerful political force. And a lot of it is because Indians come from democracy, so they're very good at debate. They're very good at organizing. They're very good at collective action. And that's what leads them to excel in the Canadian political system. At the same time, we can imagine that if current trends continue, if the immigrant population from India increases, and if the Indians continue to amass more political power, there could be a situation where the Indians take over the Canadian government in like 20 or 40 years' time. So there's a real risk that in Canada, that their native population gets replaced by the Indians. And this is happening elsewhere as well. Yes, a question.
Like all the Indian immigrants that you have mentioned, like it took a part of the Canadian population. How about the having the risk of Indians took over Canadian, but how about the people that is local in Canadian? Like how are they doing right now? Because we are all focusing on immigrants.
Right, okay. That's a great question, okay? So immigrants are suffering, but actually the local population is suffering even more because as we discussed in last class, the economy is declining and it's pretty rapid decline. So it's harder for young people to find jobs, especially with immigrants coming into the country, right? Prices are very expensive nowadays. So it's very hard for young people to live and work in big cities. So as these immigrants are coming into the country, they're putting tremendous pressure on the local population. And that's why there's so much ethnic tension throughout the Western world right now. Okay? So this leads us to a paradox. If immigrants are making life worse for everyone, especially young people, who's the future of these nations, why is this happening? Okay? So I want you guys to keep this in the back of your mind. You probably know the answer already because you know how property prices work, right? Okay, so let's move on to another topic. So Canada, like 10 years ago, introduced a new policy called MAID, called Medical Assistance in Dying, euthanasia. And the idea here is that if you feel life is meaningless, if you're depressed, if you feel that you cannot cure your disease, the government will help you kill yourself. The government will let you die. Now, the big question then is, yeah, but 25 years ago, this was illegal in the world, right? Suicide was illegal. If you help someone kill himself, you'd be put in prison. This would be basically murder. So what's the difference between suicide and the government helping you kill yourself? Well, there really isn't, okay? But the government says there is a difference, okay? So this is a brochure from the government, from the Canadian government, explaining why suicide is bad, okay? Suicide is bad, but suicide by government is good, okay? And it's really stupid. It's disgusting. It's disgustingly stupid, okay? What they say is that if you do suicide, well, you do it alone and you shock your friends and family. But if you do MAID, then everyone knows you're killing yourself, and so they won't be so sad when you die. Right? If you kill yourself, you might screw it up. But if the government does it for you, you won't screw it up because it's being facilitated by professionals who know what they're doing. All right? If you think this is stupid, there's more stupidity to come. All right? And what this tells us is, we discussed this last class, is one major sign of decline in society is the over-bureaucratization of society. The government interferes in everything, okay? This is the absolute number of deaths from euthanasia in Canada. As you can see, in 2016 it started, you had about 1,000. By 2021, it's at 10,000, okay? So the numbers are going up really rapidly. Why? Well, because if you want to kill yourself, they won't stop you. This is the number of days required to be approved for suicide. As you can see in the Netherlands, sorry, this is Oregon actually, this is Oregon, United States. Okay, the number of days have been going down, but it's still like at most a month, okay? In Canada, they'll do it in like 10 days for you. They won't even think about it. They're like, you want to kill yourself? Do it, man. Good for you. Good choice. Doctors have been trained to not doing harm, right? Well, and death ought to be the last resort. But in Canada, death is now the first resort. If you go to a doctor and say, I want to die, the doctor's like, sure, let's do it, man. That's pretty disgusting. All right, why are people killing? So like if you see, the number of approval rates have been going way up. It seems as though they have a quota to fill. This is 2019. Only 75% were approved. Now it's 81%. It's almost like they have a quota. They're trying to kill as many people as possible, right? As you can see, this number is the percentage of people who die because of euthanasia. This is the Netherlands, which for the longest time had a very open policy when it comes to euthanasia. And yeah, it's going up, but this huge spike is Canada. Okay? It seems as though Canada's in a rush to kill as many people as possible. So who's dying? Yeah, do you have a question?
So the suicide of Canada is not euthanasia? Is that also a type of euthanasia?
No, okay. All right, so suicide is when you kill yourself. Euthanasia is when a doctor helps you kill yourself. Euthanasia means good death. It means that you will die painlessly. Okay? No, okay. Euthanasia is suicide by government. Okay? All right, so why are people dying? Well, a lot of them, as you can see, most is actually from cancer. Now, what's interesting about cancer is that it's the most expensive disease to treat, right? Well, that's interesting. And a lot of cancer, it's pretty painful, but it's not terminal. You can still live with cancer, right? So it seems as though people with cancer are being encouraged to die because they're a burden on the system, which means who's dying? Who's dying here? It's poor people who are dying, right? This is pretty obvious. And this is even more interesting, okay? This is the most disgusting part. If the government were to prove your death, you would think that there'd be a rigorous process, right? It would be the last option. But let's understand why people are killing themselves. And there are two main reasons. The first major reason is loss of ability to engage in meaningful activities. It's because you're not happy. This is a lame reason to kill yourself, okay? Also, loss of ability to perform activities of daily living. It's harder for you to go buy groceries. It's harder for you to walk around. Okay? So again, what's happening is that poor people are dying. And poor people are encouraged to kill themselves because the poor are being a burden on the medical system. And that's the entire basis of euthanasia. So let me ask you this question. Why is it that 25 years ago, we discouraged euthanasia? In fact, it would be legal to conduct euthanasia, even if the person was suffering from brain cancer. And the person was just basically in hell every day. The government would not allow euthanasia. Why not? Yeah?
Maybe because it was like harder to regulate, like the procedures to take for euthanasia, and because it was like such a new thing, you have no control over what the companies who like provide the service do, or like what they do to their patients. I wouldn't even say patients, but like people who purchase their services, and also all because again, it's such a novel thing. The procedures involved, the medical companies involved, maybe what maybe to me loopholes, and it was if I was the government, I'd consider that as a potential danger, something that may be just like disturbing to this current system. Okay, all right. Yeah, that's a very interesting answer, okay? What it tells me is that the society you live in is very different from the society I grew up in, okay? Because 25 years ago, when I was younger, we were taught that every life matters. Every life is a gift from God. And in society, we have to protect everyone, especially the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. Because that's how we come together as a society. If we just let anyone die, then how do you know that you'll be protected? Right? So what mattered back then was about social cohesion, social capital, social trust. And now what matters is just numbers. How much does this cost me? How much revenue will this generate? Okay, so that's the difference in the world today. Before, we cared about social cohesion. We cared about morality. Nowadays, it's all just money, money, money. And this is interesting for us, okay? Another sign of decline is growing financialization. We talked about this last class, right? Well, guess what's happening? In the stock market